Today, I have Brian with me. He hasn't been on the channel for a long time, where we're glad to have him back. And today, he'll be helping us just get more educated on what's going on with Russia, Ukraine. And then I have a lot of news for you guys relating to the trade deal that was reached this morning. I guess technically last night. It happened, I guess, 12 a.m. London time. But we do have a trade deal and understanding with China.
Now, I know that Donald Trump has already posted about this on True Social. What kind of details have you got on that trade deal?
Okay, so we'll jump right into it. Let me share my screen real quick. I have a lot of details. We'll wait just a few more minutes for more people to join in. That way everyone can get the news. But this is what Trump posted. Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and, of course, President Trump. Full magnets. Now, when he's saying magnets, he really just means the rare earths. Well, I guess natural magnets. And any necessary rare earths will be supplied upfront by China. Likewise, we will provide China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities. We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Relationship is excellent. Thank you for your attention. Now, I do want to break down a couple of more things. Now, many of you guys may already know this. China roughly has a monopoly on refining rare earths. They refine roughly 90% of the world's rare earth supply, and they are extremely important. They're in this mic, they're in the mic Brian's using, they're in the computer, they're everywhere. Very important. So China has been using that monopoly to kind of like blackmail countries. When I say blackmail, they've been using it as leverage, basically. They try to block the access. Other countries cannot use rare earths if China is unhappy with anything that country is doing. When the United States started slapping tariffs on Chinese goods, China couldn't really fight back by just reciprocating the same tariffs, because we don't import as much from China as China imports, as we don't export as much to China as China exports to the United States. So it had to get creative, and it got creative by just targeting the rare earths. But luckily, we have a deal now. So here are the details for anyone who doesn't know. Everything now, as you guys know, when the trade war just started, it quickly escalated because China kept slapping back their tariffs. So initially on Liberation Day, if I'm remembering correctly, China had a 32% tariff, but then China put their own 32% tariff on US goods. And there was a lot of back and forth. Basically, US kept raising the tariffs, China kept matching it, US kept raising it. And we finally settled on 145% from the US side and 125% from the Chinese side. Those were the tariffs, and they were so high that basically meant there was no trade going on between the two countries. But now we have the final tariffs, and it's US, China. US is putting a 55% tariff on Chinese goods, and China is putting a 10% tariff on US goods. Now, this 55% figure, this is a lot different than what we have done with other countries. Usually, it hasn't been that high. And that's because the goal of the administration from the beginning has been simple. We don't want to cut off the trade with China, but we want to bring back all the strategic industries back to the United States. Because think about it, if we cannot produce anything, that's a really problematic situation if there's ever a war. Now, we know China has been preparing to invade Taiwan, and we have promised Taiwan or committed ourselves to defending Taiwan. That's already a very likely scenario, so we should prepare for that ahead of time, because we could be just left hanging if we don't prepare for it ahead of time and there is an invasion. Now, this is where I have a very interesting video. You guys should check it out. It's a very, very long video, but one of my favorite YouTubers, Smarter Every Day. Yeah, he tested out. Have you seen this, Brian?
Oh, yes, I have. It was a great video.
It's a 50-minute long video, but he basically tested out. Can you actually create something in China or in the United States? Like, can you create something where the whole supply chain? So let's say he created a grill cleaner, if I'm accurate. I don't grill, so I don't know too much, but
basically, if you are familiar with grilling at all, the old style grill is the ones with the bristles. Well, you get scrubbing on your grill, and those bristles can break off, end up in your food, and injure you.
Yeah.
If you try and eat it. Whereas this scrubber that he designed here, then tried to manufacture entirely in the U.S., or at least without China, does not have that issue. It's a really fascinating video, and each of the steps, it was like he takes one step forward and then is two steps back, and then he'll find a product that might do it, and then they'll actually test it. And we'll find there's issues there, or that in one case, he mentions he bought these knobs that were promised to be made in America, and yet when they arrived, the label said made in China.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of these things, it's just fascinating to actually to have him go through step by step by step, trying to find people who can do things like injection molding and the machine work and the production in the United States with United States source materials. It's really interesting.
100%. But the important part is, like, many people overlook it. For him, this video took him, I think, 2-3 years to make. And that's because the whole idea came to him when back in COVID, a lot of our personal protective equipment and personal protective gear, basically the medical masks and anything that like the nurses and all doctors needed, came from China. And now we know after 3 years, how long has it been since like the lockdowns are over? 3-4 years. After all the investigation in the last 3-4 years, we know that China knew about the virus way before everyone else. And what China started doing is they shut off the flights domestically. So Chinese citizens could not take a flight from Wuhan to another Chinese city, but they could take a flight from Wuhan to overseas. They could go to France, Italy, United States. They could do all that. And that's why the spread at the beginning was so dangerous overseas than it was in China. But the second thing China was doing after they learned about the virus and how contagious it was, the Chinese government started hoarding medical supplies. And the world quickly realized that if China needed something and some other country needed something, of course China is going to prioritize their citizens. US would do the same, but this is where everyone realized, like, we need manufacturing, especially critically important equipment and critically important supplies. We need those supply chains in the country. We don't need them in China. We don't need them even in Europe. We need it in the country. And that's why even with a trade deal now, we still have a 55% tariff on Chinese goods, because the administration's hope is this would force some factories and some companies to move back their production here. Now, the second thing you did bring up about the video, and I highly recommend everyone go check it out. 3 years in making a really great video. It just shows how bad the US manufacturing has truly gone. Because this is a lie we're always told, where it's like, oh, US doesn't do low quality manufacturing. We do high quality stuff. We do high value stuff, right? But the one issue he ran into was like, he wanted to make some machine that could make some kind of manufacturing. And what we've been told so far is like, oh, US doesn't manufacture stuff, but it manufactures the machine that manufactures stuff. But that's just not true. Even machines are now being built in China, then they're sent back to US. For whatever little manufacturing we do have, the machines are still coming from China. So even though we have some manufacturing, I don't think we could call it secure manufacturing, because we're still dependent on a foreign country to do all that. And this is why this trade war is so important. Now, here's another point that brings into this trade deal is it's only US who has, I guess, unrestricted access to Chinese rare earth. That's what this trade deal says. Now, Howard Lutnick, he's the Secretary of Commerce, he was at the negotiations, and he said that US tried pushing China to open up the rare earth to every single country in the world, but China just didn't want to do that. And that's because China realizes what US is trying to do. If you guys know, we've been covering this on the channel, where US is forcing other countries to put tariffs on Chinese goods, because when we had a trade war back in 2018, China did this thing where they just used other countries to ship in Chinese supplies. And that's something that actually happens in the video, because he wanted to have everything made in the United States, but that's just physically not possible because of how little we manufacture. So he bought something from India, where the Indian supplier told him that, yep, this is not made in China. But when the thing actually arrived in his warehouse, he can see Chinese words on the boxes. You can easily tell that it's not Indian, it's a Chinese supplier who's selling these. So this is something China has been doing since 2018, maybe even before. Whenever a country slaps on tariffs on Chinese goods, what China does is basically set up warehouses in other countries, and then they ship Chinese goods to those countries. They change the label from made in China to whatever country the warehouse is in, and then they ship it into the United States. So now US is trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And to fight against the leverage US has now, we have the biggest market, and that's the leverage. So China is using rare earths with other countries to fight against that leverage.